Thank you so much, everyone, for making it to our webinar today. We have Mr. Rodrigo Gutierrez joining us, who has been working in education in San Diego for nearly 20 years. And recently he started working for the University of California, San Diego, or UCSD School of Medicine, as a recruitment admissions specialist. Most of his experiences has been working at San Diego State University, or SDSU, with their Educational Opportunity Program, or EOP. And during his time with EOP at SDSU, he worked with prospective and current low-income first-generation college students from all over the state of California. So please welcome Mr. Gutierrez.
Hello, folks. How are you doing today? All right. I know I'm used to the whole audience, like physical audience. So, I'm just gonna take these screens right here. I'm sorry, Kristen, if I copy and paste stuff into the chat, it'll go to everyone on the audience? Or do I have to?
Yes.
Does.
Let me see. I think
Okay,
you
I
should
see
be
it.
able to, now you should be able to.
So you can
Thanks,
choose
Judy.
to send it to everybody because there's an option. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, it's just that everyone option wasn't posting just yet. So hello folks, I'm just gonna be taking a 1 minute to print out copy some links in the chat for you to reference later on when it comes to the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine. These are all very important things as relate to our School of Medicine, and I will be referring to it as a School of Medicine, just as a FYI. I know we're here for medical school, but in the industry, for the most part, they talk about the School of Medicine. So, UCLA School, the Geffen School of Medicine, the University of Southern California Keck School of Medicine, the UCI School of Medicine, the UCSD School of Medicine. They go by the acronym SOM, SOM. So whenever someone's talking about SOM, that's when they're in the medical school context, that's what they're referring to. They're referring to the School of Medicine. So I'm just providing links primarily from our School of Medicine websites. It has a lot of pertinent information in regards to, of course, admission stuff, which we will be covering, in addition to financial aid, student affairs information regarding the School of Medicine. Keep in mind that, as in with undergraduate, graduate, there's always stuff outside the classroom, and we have a vibrant student affairs program that has programming for various types of interests when it comes to School of Medicine students. Printing those right here. And then these last two are in regards to resources for applying to medical school. And we'll kind of just go over that briefly at the end over there for you. So from my understanding, we are going to be going over a presentation, which I will be emailing to the facilitator, which will be able to be distributed to you folks at a later date. And it just kind of goes over the application process and what it takes to be a successful applicant for the UCSD School of Medicine. Now, there's going to be a lot of points where there's going to be a lot of overlap, but you got to keep in mind that this is specific for the University of California, San Diego. Okay. Other schools within the UC system, UC Irvine, UC Davis, UC California, San Francisco, UCLA, Riverside, they might have their own particular nuanced differences when it comes to the application process, but all of us are, for the most part, uniform. So you're going to extrapolate bits and pieces that would apply towards your UCSD application experience and other experiences within the state of California. But for right now, we're going to focus on what it takes to be a medical school student at UC San Diego, okay? So let me get started with my screen sharing. And let's see. All righty. All righty. So we see the PowerPoint over there? Yes? All right, excellent. Thank you. All right, so let me begin. My introduction pretty much speaks for itself. Rodrigo Gutierrez. I'm an alumni of San Diego State University and I was a staff member there. I worked there for graduated from undergraduate there, got my master's there as well, and worked there for 10 years with recruitment and also programming for current students. I've worked a lot in recruitment, and this is my first few months within the School of Medicine. So I'm here to answer any questions. A little bit about myself. I have come from a very extensive higher education background. I'm originally from Los Angeles, so very familiar with the Southern California culture and been in San Diego for about 25 years. So I'm very familiar with what it's like to be here in San Diego as a college student. So we're gonna just be covering over a bunch of things. So just FYI, and then enter the questions in the chat as you go, and then our facilitators will ask them at the end of the presentation. Okay, so getting into medical school. So these are the topics we're going to be discussing today. What is the goal of medical school? Of course, what are medical schools asking for? The application process. This next one's probably going to be very important for you, advising and addressing myths in regards to medical school. And of course, at the end, we're going to save some question and answer time. Okay, so in some of these presentations slides, there's going to be some highlighted information. They're nothing really important. They're just important mental cues for me just to kind of reemphasize certain things. So what is the goal of medical school? Think of this, while you do want to get a medical school, don't think of it as that. Well, this isn't the end destination for you folks, okay? Keep in mind that the goal isn't to get a medical school, but is to start a career as a physician. Our goal as a University of California School of Medicine is to prepare doctors to be physicians in the state of California. That is our ideal goal. That's why we're here. We're supported by the state of California. But, if students do go on to practice in other states, that's fine. But our primary goal with placement, with education and everything is to become a doctor in the state of California. One of the things you have to ask yourself about medical school, like, are you sure this is what you want? Like, how do you know for sure? A lot of folks students tend to ask themselves, well, I'm good at science. I guess I could be a doctor. And that is one way to approach it too, but you got to keep in mind there's going to be a lot of hard work and dedication, and maybe not just being good at science would be a good indicator that you might be a good doctor. So something to kind of get into the self-evaluation process for yourself. Or is this something that you are expected to do? Peer pressure, family pressures. I do come across a lot of medical school students, whether year 1, year 4, where come from a family of doctors. Their parents are both doctors, their siblings are doctors, and they want to be doctors. For some folks, they thrive in that environment because it's something that's been around them, and for some folks, it might not be for them. They're just doing it just because the family expects it for them. So kind of just know what your purpose is, because like I said, there's going to be a lot that you're going to have to do in order to prepare yourself, not only to get into medical school, but of course to become a doctor afterwards. And this goes without saying, medicine is a wonderful career, but it entails a lot of sacrifice and ongoing dedication to service, which we'll go over. So like I said earlier, it's not to get into medical school, but start your career as a physician. So what does that entail? That entails upon graduation, whether you're undergraduate, whether you go to your master's, whether you get your doctorate, whether you go change careers, graduate, go in a different career, then you decide you want to change back and possibly pursue your medical degree. Keep in mind, once you start medical school, there's at least 4 years of medical school. Okay, so in class, in labs, and clinical work, you're going to be there for at least another 4 more years. After that, at least another 3 years, as many as 7, working a paid internship or residency. Okay, so that's where you're getting your experience, your field work as a doctor in the field that you chose, that you wanted to participate in. Okay, and some of those are 80-hour work weeks. You have to work on getting a licensure, you have to practice, and then of course there's going to be a lot of financial output on your end as well in regards to paying for school, paying for housing, and all that stuff. When you're a resident and internship, You will be getting paid, but you won't be getting paid as much as an established doctor completed their residency, okay? So just something to keep in mind. It will be there. Think of this as an investment in yourself of the sacrifice and the time dedication to it. But keep in mind, it's going to pay off later, not immediately, okay? Admission into medical school. In most basic terms, medical schools are looking for evidence that you will become a good doctor. Okay. And then, of course, there's always with any types of admission situation, there's going to be metrics involved when it comes to what schools are looking at. The main metrics here are going to be your GPA from undergraduate, and of course, the recommended coursework and your MCAT. Okay, so excellent academic qualifications, support of your faculty with letters of recommendation, and extracurricular activities, creative and scholarly activities, meaningful exposure to medical profession, research, clinical volunteering, clinical shadowing. A lot of times there are built-in systems in place once you're in the medical school, but we want to see your demonstrated determination to go find those clinical shadowing, those research, those volunteer opportunities on your own to build up your application. Evidence the commitment of service. That's a broad definition, but whatever service is to you, that's what we want to hear. Other stuff such as leadership, artistic endeavors, athletics, teaching, that's also extremely important. One of the things I want to harp on this again when it comes to extracurricular and creative and scholarly activities. A lot of the questions I've been receiving when it comes to the application process, we just opened up our application when folks are filling in this information. It's like, what's a good volunteer opportunity? What's a good volunteer experience? And honestly, we can say, and speaking to my predecessors and other campuses, there really is no definitive answer for that. There's nothing concrete that we can tell you, do this and they'll improve your chances. What we can say is what best you can do. So what I would recommend is you might think that you're involved in a ton of student organizations and activities outside the classroom. That's fine and all. That's the quantity of experience. But one of the things we're looking for when it comes to who would be a good doctor is the depth of experience. Okay, you could be in 10 student organizations and you just attended general meetings and you were a general member. But did you start an organization? Did you take up leadership in an organization? Did you grow an organization from humble beginnings to something that's productive and worthwhile for students and engagement? Is it in the health field? Those kind of things. So we look at depth a little more than the number of experiences. So just something to keep in mind. We want you to demonstrate for us that you have what it takes to dedicate yourself to something and then that could demonstrate maybe future down the line that you would be a good doctor. Okay. Admissions. Each school has its own approach, but many aspects are similar, like I mentioned earlier. Just to give you a numbers game, we get a large number of applicants every year. Some are higher, some are lower. We get around 9,000 applications every year for admission. Okay, 9,000 admission applications. Then from there, we go down, we cut out the ones that initially don't make the cut academically. Typically, that's with GPA and MCAT scores. If they're below certain thresholds that we're not even going to look at, then we're getting rid of those. But that still leaves us, because medical school is a very competitive process, that still leaves us with thousands upon thousands of students that meet those metrics when it comes to academics with the GPA and the MCAT. Okay, so from there, we whittle it down to around 6,000 applicants. From those 6,000, they're getting a secondary application. What the secondary application entails is a little more in-depth about yourself. So we're going to ask you if you're interested in specific programs when it comes to our medical school. We're going to ask you for meaningful experiences during your undergraduate or something that's significant to you that made you apply to medical school. We want the letters of recommendation from faculty, your personal statements. If you have a hard upbringing, a challenging upbringing. We want you to demonstrate that as well as show us that, something that made you resilient and strong and, created a determination in you to make you want to apply for medical school. So those are the kind of things we ask for in the secondary application, okay? From there, as we start evaluating the secondary applications and we get them back from our admissions committee, which, by the way, they're not just looking at numbers, they're looking at everything that you submit. Once we get that, we'll select students for interviews. The interviews, we select about 900 students, okay? So we're from 9,000 to 900. That's just 10%. That's just, now we're getting near the top. Now, keep in mind, as you see at the bottom number here, this slide, we have about an anticipated class every year of 140 students. Okay, so we go from 9,000 to 140. And there's no cookie cutter way that we admit students. We do a holistic approach. We look at everything. We look at those metrics I talked about, letters of recommendation, interviews, supplemental information, personal statements, everything that we can see to paint the best picture of you possible before you interview and after you interview, so we can make a determination on whether or not you'd be a good candidate for our School of Medicine, okay? So just to give you a numbers game of what it's like for the process on our end and on your end as well. One of the key things is pay attention to deadlines. MCAS, you see that right here, AMCAS. That's the primary application software system that we use to submit all your information for your application for medical school, okay? So one of the key things, and we communicate constantly with our students and our applicants. We put deadlines in our letters, and we are able to see whether or not a student has read an email, has opened an email to begin with, and so we see that you are aware of the deadline. So pay attention to deadlines. There are no extensions for deadlines, okay? You saw the numbers in the previous slide, 9,140. Don't give us a reason to withdraw your application, okay? Keep on top of those deadlines, whether here or other schools. And we'll talk about ways that you can do that, okay? Ensure accurate contact information for school queries. So you want to put, so let's just say you're graduating from your undergraduate institution and that was your primary email address. You might want to use another email address, for example, because after a certain point with some undergraduate programs, your email will expire after a certain point in time after you graduated. So if you applied through MCAS with that undergraduate email address and then they shut it off during the application process, there's no way for us to get a hold of you and get your information and contact you. So make sure you want to choose the email that you're going to be checking regularly, and that you will be submitting with other schools, so everything's organized and nice and uniform, okay?
Can I just
MCAT,
add something? Can I just
go for
add
it.
something to that?
Yeah.
I know some people like to have cutesy emails. Please don't come up with these cutesy emails that are not professional or that are hard, like has like 75 different characters and underline. Nobody like if it's not a simple email like your first name dot last name, something really easy. First, it could be a mistake that it's mistyped. Second, if it's something like I've seen some of these emails that people have do it, it's really unprofessional, and they're just going to say, you know what, this person is not. So I'm just throwing that out there as a free thing. Just, anyways, sorry.
No, and that's perfect. Thank you, Jubin. I appreciate the insight because that's a key thing. Being organized and professional, and also, like you said, you don't want give us the opportunity to withdraw your application because you wrote in you misspelled your email, you forgot one character in this long, complicated email address. Just do blah, 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 blah at Gmail. Keep all your documents there. Keep your calendar organized for deadlines, interviews, all that stuff. But we'll talk about that. Anyway, where was I? Yes, MCAT. MCAT is the primary exam for medical school. Think of it as kind of like when you were applying for undergraduate, the SAT, ACC, that kind of thing. MCAT for medical school. Do you need to take it? Yes, you do. So for those of you, so let's just say hypothetical, all of you are gonna be current applicants right now for medical school at University of California, San Diego, and you're gonna start in the fall. So you're applying right now and you haven't taken the MCAT. That's fine. You have an August date, September date, and maybe an October date. So any date in the first calendar year where you are applying, that's fine. Now, let's just say you don't have a test date until January, February of 2025, and you're going to start in fall 2025. That's not going to give us enough time to evaluate that updated score and to get it in time from the test taking service to evaluate it, add it to your application, and maybe see if we can put you in one of the final interview dates, which would be in February. That's cutting it off way too close. So in order to save you a headache and save us a headache, try to get them done the year that you're applying. So if you're applying in 2024 right now to start in 2025, take it 2024. If you're going to be applying next year in 2025, you're going to take it in 2025 to start in 2026, and so on and so forth. Just something to keep in mind. It says here, wait for scores in August, September, October, and you could submit the application without the MCAT score. You just put in the date that you're going to be taking the exam, okay? That is fine. Secondary applications are automatic for students with competitive grades and MCAT scores. So what that means pretty much is our system's going to rank you based on the high GPAs, high test scores. They will get secondaries no matter what. And like I said, 6,000 of them, most students are going to be qualifying and meeting those academic metrics. All remaining applicants are reviewed with some additional granted secondary applications after careful review. That's why it's important to fill out the application and be as accurate as possible for yourself and telling your story, okay? Because if you're borderline when it comes to these things, to get a secondary application, and then we read it, it's like, wow, actually this person does deserve a shot for an interview. They send you a secondary application, you come in for an interview and you wow them, then you know it's because what you did, you just articulated it for us so we can have that knowledge. Okay. And then, boop. All right, secondary application. Most medical schools of medicine will have a secondary application. They vary by format, but ours require autobiographical sketch, reformatted extracurricular activities. So if you submitted them in the first one, and you maybe can elaborate more in the secondary, please do so. If you feel like you're repeating yourself too much, maybe take something else. But if you need to elaborate more on something that was really significant, there's a portion in there called meaningful experiences. And if you put that in your initial application and you want to kind of like dive deeper into it and why that's important for you in medical school, put that in there as well. Okay, family background information. This is just, to determine first generation, that kind of stuff. Letters of recommendation. Here's where we get a lot of questions for. A minimum of 3 letters are required from individuals who consider you evaluation of your qualifications for medical school. There are no requirements like I need 1 faculty member in science, 1 outside of science, or 1 faculty. We want someone that's going to write well about you. Okay, that's the important thing. As you see this last bullet, it is helpful if the letter writers know you well. Personal touch is more important than a big name. What that means is, let's just say you are going to a school with a very distinguished biology program or pre-med program, and there's a very nationally recognized faculty member there, and you're in his course or her course or whoever's course, whatever it is. Anyway, you're in their course. You're in their course and you approach them saying, I would like a letter of recommendation for my med school application. And they're like, of course, here you go. And they didn't really get to know you or anything, and they don't know a lot about you. All their letters are going to say is like, hello, my name is Professor blah, blah, blah from blah, blah, blah. I had the distinction of teaching this student. They received this grade in this course in this semester. I recommend them for medical school. And that's it. Like, that's not going to show our committee anything about you. It shows that you enrolled in this pretty famous person's course, but that's it, you and thousands of other students. So that's not going to really stand you apart. It's nice, but it's not going to stand you apart. We want to read about you. Okay, what would make you a good candidate for medical school? Now, it says here, a good part, a minimum of 3 letters, okay? And now some folks have been emailing me, well, what's the maximum letters of recommendation I could submit? Through MCAS, the maximum is 7 that they'll take, but keep this in mind. How much more is the committee going to know about you between the 3rd letter of recommendation and the 7th letter of recommendation? How much new information is going to be between those 3? 4, okay. 5, then afterwards it just kind of gets repetitive, and this, these are faculty members that are doing it. Not saying that they're in a hurry and they don't have time for it. They are setting a time for this, but you want it, the best ones possible that write about you. So while you can do 7, think about that when you're applying to all these schools. Is it going to be number 3 going to be that much more different than number 7? So just something to keep in mind when requesting those letters of recommendation. The secondary review is conducted by a subgroup of our admissions committee, so made up of faculty, administration, and current medical school students, either students in residency or 3rd-year students. Okay, it's very time consuming. Like I said, it can take up to 4 months of review. They have to review everything: autobiographical statement, letters of recommendation, activities. And then this determines whether or not you get an interview. Like I said, details provide help give you credit for what you have done. Don't be humble at any point in this process, okay? You're competing with thousands upon thousands of people, not only at UCSD, but at schools across the country, okay? So you want to stand out. So put your best foot forward when it comes to the application process. So interview day, once you get selected for an interview, you're going to be given options, and they're all done via Zoom, all virtual. And there's something called MMIs, multiple mini interview format. You can read more about them if you just do a quick Reddit search or YouTube search, and it talks about MMI formats. And all the questions vary, but they're kind of thematic, and there's practice ones. And one of those resources I gave you has information about MMI tips and tricks and best practices and that kind of thing. So they give you 8 different scenarios where you go from room to room to room, and you're going to address these scenarios. And here's a huge tip I learned from our executive committee is they're going to be asking you very specific questions regarding scenarios, inside and outside the hospital, that kind of thing. Don't feel that you need to get the question 100% correct. Even though, yes, we want that. We want to see your knowledge, test your knowledge and all that stuff. Almost as important as seeing you get the question right is how you came up with your answer. Okay, even if you might be wrong a little bit, they want to see the wheels turning. They want to see how they want to critically think. They want to observe how you critically think in these situations, to determine whether or not you can think on your feet, you can adjust, move, all those things. So just something to keep in mind, okay? So don't feel flustered that when you come to MMI time and you don't know the answer. It's like, well, talk your way through it, see what you can do to kind of put your best foot forward and let them know what your mindset is thinking, trying to figure out that answer. So maybe if you not get it right and they see that, your thinking process and how it works, that could be just as important, okay? Like I said, don't get nervous, prepare and search for sample questions like I mentioned earlier. Admissions myths. UC San Diego School of Medicine does not admit students from my school. It does. It's difficult everywhere. Most of our applicants are from the state of California. Most our top feeder schools are other UC campuses. So, but we have seen competitiveness from all over the country. But for the most part, since a large chunk of our applicants come from California and from the UC system, that's kind of like where our numbers tend to trend to go towards, because that's just the applicant pool we're working with. It says here, you know, UCSD, UCLA, Berkeley, Stanford usually have the highest number, you know, but it all depends. It's all uniform. Like I say, you want to make the determination for yourself. You want to have the best grades, best application possible. So that shouldn't even be your concern. Your best immediate concern should be, what are you doing to prepare yourself? We don't have a bias towards UCSD, though it doesn't hurt. The key thing is, like, we're not going to see UCSD as an undergraduate institution and think like, okay, this person gets an interview. That's not the case. We know it doesn't hurt. It doesn't help either, but it might help in those like kind of like indirect ways where it's like, you know, faculty member that would write a good letter, you know, on the campus or that kind of thing, or someone within the system, health system here in San Diego, being a UCSD student, but it's not going to push anything forward. It's not some imaginary number that we throw out there that, oh, this is going to give this guy some extra consideration. No, it's just something that's there. And if it benefits you, it's just a happy coincidence. But for the most part, we don't look at those students with more focus priority than other students that are applying to our School of Medicine. Yep, and I said not a bias against UCSD. Yep. All right. So UCSD School of Medicine is a basic science school, and you have to be a life science major to be accepted. Fact, it is highly ranked nationwide in research and primary care, but we take students from all different types of majors. If you go on one of the links in there by the numbers for our admissions page, it goes over some of the applicants that the undergraduate majors that they came in as, political science, women's studies, African American studies, you know, those kind of things. So, you know, a lot of times those tend to fall under students, you know, after graduate school or possibly changing careers, and they're like a more adult learner, like non-traditional student. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But, you know, they did the work academically and outside the classroom to be the best candidate to be selected for medical school. See, basic science school, a majority of the incoming class will be biology or chemistry. Like I said earlier, this is just a reflection of our applicant pool. It's not a preference, okay? And if you notice, if you go to the link for our admissions page, it says recommended coursework, not required coursework, okay? So we're just looking at all that information. We want to make sure you take a lot of those courses. And if you need to get into a post-bac program after you finish your undergraduate to bump up your GPA, you would probably look into those courses to help out your application. But, you know, just something to keep in mind here, recent majors, like I mentioned here, South Asian studies, English, history, religion, music, exercise, poli-sci, naval architecture, stuff like that. There is a checklist for a successful applicant with regards to extracurricular activities. We have hundreds of years of experience doing this, so there really is no checklist, no anything. For those of you that play video games like me, there is no cheat code. There is nothing that you could do. Just put that on your application, be like, I'm in, it's cool, we're done here. That's not the case. There's a lot of stuff that you can do to make yourself look better by any means, but there's no one magic formula, one trick that's going to get you into any medical school, okay? So just something to keep in mind. You want to make sure you're the most well-rounded, developed student possible in applying, okay? We are looking for applicants that have explored a career in medicine. We don't want students that just discovered in their third year medical school that they don't want this career, okay? There can be burnout when it comes to medical school, and just they did it because they wanted to get in medical school, but not really to become a doctor. They just wanted to get in medical school, and then just a couple years in, they're like, really, this isn't for me. So that's kind of thing going back into the beginning, like, is this something that's going to be right for you? Okay, because the first 2 years are very academically intensive, while there is no pass. But as you get in the third and fourth year, it becomes very academically competitive. And so you kind of need to figure that out before you even apply if this is going to be a road that you want to travel to. Okay. In-depth experiences are generally preferred as opposed to dozens of smaller experiences, like I mentioned earlier. More clearly defined as an applicant, more likely to achieve leadership positions, more likely to get stronger letters of recommendation when we see that you have the depth of experience, not just smaller ones. Okay. Let's see. Here you go. As a pre-med, ask yourself, what kind of career do you see yourself having? A physician or scientist doing research, primary care, building relationships, outreach to communities, all that kind of stuff. And we're fortunate enough at the UC San Diego School of Medicine where we have options like that, where you can not only become a medical doctor and work in radiology, anesthesiology, clinical psychology, surgery, primary care, but also you could be a research scientist. You could go back into the community and work with a free clinic, or you can start your own clinic, in the communities where you come from. There's programs such as Prime and GHAC, which GHAC is a global health initiative that you study abroad as part of your graduation requirements. So there's all different programs and places where you can get involved with the medical school once you're in there to kind of like do the other things outside of the service, outside of just studying and being a doctor, which is the main goal, of course, obviously. Yeah, so like I said, there is a checklist. We do not outline for applicants why they did or did not get in a certain step of our process. We want to maintain a system of evaluation and accomplishments that's self-generated. So do something that you want to do, not you think what you have to do to get into medical school. One of the things it says on our website, and it says in a lot of our literature, is that we do not give updates on, we do not give reasoning behind the admissions decision. When it comes to the initial application, it's probably because of grades, early on in the process. But when it comes to secondary and the interviews and all that, it's a holistic approach that we're doing. We're looking at those metrics initially, of course, but then we're looking at those letters of rec, that autobiographical sketch, extracurricular activities, and to show to see that demonstrated passion to work in the medical field. So those are the things we're looking at when it comes to checklist. So, and we really can't determine whether or not like this one thing didn't get you into medical school. We have, like I said, thousands of applicants that we're reviewing all the time, and then hundreds after the interview process too, where it even gets more difficult because these are the top 10% of the application pool. So it might not be that your application was bad. It just, there might have been someone that was better and there was 139 people better. It's one of those unfortunate situations, but if you put in the work, then the less you have to worry about because you put your best foot forward when it comes to the application process. If my grades are weak, I can compensate with my MCAT scores. What do you mean by weak grades? So main thing is with GPA, anything above 3.1 and above, you have an opportunity to get a secondary application, okay? You have a chance to get a secondary application and then possibly selected for an interview, okay? It might be difficult, but you have a shot. Anything below 3.1, your admission is automatically no longer considered for admission into the UC San Diego School of Medicine, okay? So that's typically how that works. Okay, so you want high enough GPA and high enough MCAT. And the MCAT, I think the cutoff somewhere, it's like 504, 50, somewhere around there, like that kind of thing, where we kind of determine like what tier you're in. And so, we have a cutoff somewhere around like 500, low 500s. If my grades are weak, I can compensate with my MCAT. Obviously, not here and probably not anywhere. Like I said, career medicine is about continuing education, hard work, diligence, and responsibility. There is a upward trend in GPA when it comes to applicants. So applicants are tending to have higher and higher GPAs, whether that be doing a focused, concentrated post-bac work, which is, you're taking courses after you get your undergraduate, and it's heavily focused. You're taking 30 units in 1 year, And in that 1 year, you literally have to, the expectation is that you're getting A's in all those courses. And that post-bac work will count towards your medical school application, okay? And we don't evaluate it. All that's done by MCAS, the application system. Okay, and we're only interested in students going directly into medical school. Wrong. We tend to have more and more students lately that are coming in after the fact in terms of changing careers. So like students in their upper 20s, early 30s that are applying to our program and getting in. So just don't feel that you need to finish graduate and go straight into medical school, okay? There are options for you. You can take that time to do some post-bac work, improve your GPA, do some clinical work, shadowing, volunteering, that kind of stuff, job experience, or just life experience to save, or maybe working and just saving up money. It's all up to you. So kind of don't feel that there's no cookie cutter way to get in to med school. There's no cookie cutter student that we're looking for. Okay, it could be fresh out of undergraduate, it could be some 43-year-old guy talking on a Zoom call to prospective medical school students. You know, it could be anyone that could be applied. That was me, by the way. I was referring to myself. Let's see what else. Last year, in previous years, most students tended to be straight out of undergraduate, but now there's more and more gap years, okay? And probably in COVID has something to do with it. As stuff is slowly kind of like returning back to baseline of how it was prior to 2020. But, you know, takeaways, GPA and MCAT are not the only factors. Experiences do matter. Okay? And like I said, this is the goal. You know, you want to have a career as a physician. It is for many a wonderful career, but like I said, it's not for everyone. There's going to be a lot of hard work and responsibility. Lastly, these are some of the healthcare professions that we offer programs in, not all of them, but that's just highlighted ones, MD programs. So when it comes to like those specific offshoot programs, like I mentioned, Prime and GHAC and all that, you first have to get into our School of Medicine. Once you're in the School of Medicine, then those other programs will determine like, okay, these students showed interest, they got into medical school. Now let's see if they can be part of our program, okay? And those programs typically, depending across state, can be pretty super small or, you know, about like 15 students every year. It all depends on the program and their funding and all that stuff. But yeah, with that being said, that is it on my end. I am going to end this slideshow and we can get into your questions, folks. So
Awesome. So we have a good number of questions coming in the chat. Our first question, I think you addressed a little bit earlier, is my MCAT is currently scheduled for August 24th. All other of my application materials are ready to go. And would you suggest moving forward with the cycle or wait until the next cycle?
I would suggest moving forward with this cycle. Because I mean, you can apply, and like I mentioned earlier, you can apply without having those exam results. You have them, you know, obviously you give them the school code and then they get submitted to us and they're added onto your application through MCAS. And then that will be determining whether or not you'd be eligible for this upcoming year. You could do that if you want to, or you can wait. That's perfectly fine as well. Kind of it's extremely different from applying for undergraduate. There's still like very similar components in it, and that what we would tell folks in the undergraduate world with the SAT, kind of like with the letters of recommendation, what's the difference between taking it 2 times and 3 times, 4 times? Your score isn't going to improve, maybe not that much. Might be a little bit, but not like statistically significant enough, you know, based on the bell curve, yada, all that stuff. So, you know, if you take it 1 or 2 times, it kind of gonna give you a good idea of your range. So if you can and you have all your materials ready, apply for this year, definitely.
Can the UCSD Postback program strengthen your application when applying to UCSD School of Medicine?
Any post-bac program would strengthen your application. It doesn't have to be one specifically from UCSD. Like I mentioned towards the tail end, it's what I've learned during this process in my trainings is that like postbac programs are very accelerated academic programs. So it's a year pretty much if you want to be successful and get the most out of it, your intention of going to postbac, which is to improve your undergraduate GPA, is that you're pretty much going to school and that's it. So, I mean, that's like an ideal situation, but obviously a lot of us have jobs, have families and all that stuff, bills to pay and all that kind of thing. But you're in a postbac program, for the most part, your focus is going to be academic success. And that's the best way to get it, to improve your chances, not only our campus, but any campus.
All right, so our next question is, on average, how much financial aid is given to students?
So there is no really like determined number. So here, okay, so the financial aid, the way it works for you still, when students are applying for medical school and they're doing the process and, then when FAFSA opens up, they still have to provide, the student has to provide all their information as well as all their parents' information as well, even though they might not be, dependent on the parent anymore. It's still factored into the kind of like support and financial aid stuff because there are scholarships available. They're need-based scholarships. Okay, so what our financial aid office does a good job is aggregating a bunch of scholarships for our School of Medicine specifically. And then based on eligibility of students, they give them these locked in amounts for 4 years of financial aid. Now there's extra financial aid out there in terms of different programs like GHAC. And then we have this other program that's coming up. It's called the TAN Family Scholar Program. And that one, details I'm working on that one yet. But for right now, there is going to be some sort of scholarship component. They just don't know what the amount is. So there are need-based scholarships out there. Everything else then would be just activated loans. And so that's kind of one of the things for you folks that are kind of like thinking about like cost of education, cost of attendance, books, registration fees, parking, all that stuff. And med school, it's a little different. There are going to be, the registration fees, obviously lab fees, housing and all that. So you have to, one of the things we talked about was, is this something for you? Because if you go on the MCAS website, you go to choose your medical school and it gives you like a list of the profiles of the school. One of the things it will mention in there is the average student debt accumulated afterwards. So it's not, unless you're like mega rich, it's going to be pricey. There is financial aid options, but there's probably a good chance you might be taking out loans during the process. Our financial aid office does a good job of educating our students, but me, like I said, coming from an EOP background, it's like, what? You have to pay what for school? There's no there are scholarships, but it's just not as prevalent as they were in the undergraduate world. So anything beyond just the ones that are provided by our school, which is a lot, you'd have to go out and get those yourselves. But we do have those available. So there's no traditional grants, there's no federal work study. It's either the need-based scholarship or loans.
The next question is, as a first gen, would you advise attending a post-bac program if GPA is less than a 3.0?
Yes, 100%. 100%. And kind of gonna attach kind of some myth that we kind of didn't talk about earlier is that, this program right here is for community college students. Okay, and we get a lot of questions like, well, I took this required or recommended course at a community college. Will that count towards my admission into medical school? What I tell folks is when you graduated from your 4-year university, on any point in your diploma, did it say attended a community college before graduating? No, you completed the courses and you graduated from a four-year university. We are looking at just to make sure that you took the courses, the proper courses that are necessary to meet the requirements to get into medical school, okay? So whether you took it online from an accredited course institution, I should say, or a community college, that doesn't matter. As long as it's accredited and you completed it, that's all that matters. That's what we're looking for. So dispel that myth that community college courses aren't going to count towards med school. They will. They do.
Can you unshare your screen, please?
Me?
Yes.
Like that? Unshare. Sorry. Screen one. There? Good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right. We have a lot of questions that I know you addressed this like earlier in one of your myths. A lot of people are still like asking if like if your undergraduate years were in UCSD or like your postback is in UCSD, is there any priority given to UCSD students for the School of Medicine?
No, there's not. No, there's not, unfortunately. We're not like, there might be some validity in that with comes to community, private institutions, but not for us. Not for
Yeah,
us at
public institutions can't have any kind of special, like certainly in California,
yeah.
you cannot have any kind of, it has to be all equal and it has to be all like the same. So it's not going to be, you're not going to get, some personal handshake if you go to certain program. There are some programs that are S&P programs in private schools that, yes, if you go to their program, they automatically get it. But most post programs in California that are connected to medical schools in California and public medical schools are not like that. Or the same goes with undergrads. I mean, Mr. Gutierrez is not sitting there picking off his favorite, undergraduate school versus another one. They just don't do that.
I wish I could. No, I'm just kidding.
These next two questions are related to metrics. And so one person asked, how heavily are stats weighed in the admissions decisions? And can you share the minimum GPA and MCAT that you screen out?
So as I mentioned towards the end, like with GPA, anything below 3.1. So if you're like 3.09, you're not gonna get consideration. You're not gonna move past consideration, just the initial application. For the MCAT, I want to say it's like 503 or 505. I'm not 100% sure. So we admit students based on tiers. So obviously the top tiers, top GPA, top MCATs, they're getting a secondary application. They're getting, all that stuff. They're moving on in the process. For those below that, the second tier, they might have the qualifying GPA, but maybe not the MCAT. So, their MCAT might be like 500, but they have like a 3.6 GPA. That kind of thing. And then below that, it's the 3.1 GPA, but then they need to have like a 507, 508, 510 MCAT. And so these are based on numbers, historical data, based on trends of admission and like continuity and continuation rates and all that stuff. So that's the metrics that we're looking at. Because keep in mind, medical school is extremely competitive. So even like an example was on the administrative side of MCAS, the application website, you can kind of break down, you could funnel students and you're like, okay, my director was showing me this. He's like, okay, we have 9,000 applicants. Show me the applicants with below 3.8 and below. It was 8,000. Okay, 3.7 and below, 7,000. 3.6. And so, it's still like those high numbers are up there. And like, it's not really giving us much. So we have to like kind of mix and match it. So there is no defined metric. If you're want to look at the minimums, you're missing the point of what I talked about for the past 45 minutes. You want to see if this is something for you, not just medical school, but after the fact. This is a lot of work, a lot of sacrifice, a lot of dedication, a lot of money. So you want to make sure you're ready to go in that regards. So obviously the metrics is a good starting point, like the minimums, but you want to move beyond that. Don't feel like, okay, I have a 3.2, I have a shot. You're climbing uphill, a very steep hill, if that's the case. So you want it, the higher the better. So the less you have to worry about.
All right, so for the next question, for the 2025 to 2026 application cycle, what's the earliest and the latest MCAT score that UCSD accepts?
So they want to start. So that means, okay, so right now we're in the 24-25 application cycle, and for our intensive purposes. So the last one we would take for this cycle to start in 2025. The last one would be October, November. Those test dates would be like the last ones. And I'm not actually sure. I know October. I'm not sure about November. Anything taken in 2025 will not be considered for admission for this upcoming fall. So if this student wants to start in fall 26, they need to have their test scores done before the end of the 2025 calendar year. Okay. So just start like looking at the schedule. If they're applying for that year, or if they're applying this year, they need to start take it before November. If they're taking it for the following year, they have until the end of this year. Okay.
The next question is, how many hours of each clinical component are recommended?
There really is no recommended hours. They want to see in depth. So they don't want to see like 10 hours here, 10 hours there. They want to see like dozens of hours or hundreds of hours if need be, because they want to see that demonstrated passion and commitment to the medical field. And so while obviously they're not going to be able to do hundreds of hours over multiple sites and all that, but if they, kind of what I mentioned earlier, the depth of experience, not so much the quantity. So if they're like diving into this program to be a leader and develop it and grow it within their community, that will help. But there's no like minimum stuff. Like I said, that's why we ask for all this information, because we want to see everything that you've done. So don't be humble when you're listing it.
Our next question is more specific to an individual. They're 19, graduating in fall from UCI in public health, and then they're planning to take a gap year for 1 to 2 years before applying. So they're trying to ask if it's better to work in a hospital clinical setting during their gap year, or to get a job as a public health major.
What I like about medical schools applicant students is a lot of times they answer their own questions when they're asking it. Either one. I mean, they're not going to be, neither one of those is going to be looked at as detrimental towards the process in a gap year. Okay. Oh, I saw a baby. But it's not going to be detrimental towards you. Whatever you can do in that gap year to be as productive as possible. Of course, if you need to work, you can work, but if there's opportunities to gain that experience in a hospital or at a clinic in the community, by all means, go for it. We don't help with placement of those kind of situations for prospective students. That's, on the student on their own. We do that once students are here, enrolled in our program and our courses. We have partnerships where we place them. But before that, it's on the students to find that for themselves. Either one's fine, depending on the type of medicine that they want to get into, the field. But keep this in mind as well. Not every medical field that you're going to choose when you're applying and entering medical school is going to be the one that you end with, if that makes sense. There's a lot of folks that after like their second or third year, they're like, you know what, I wanted to do this, but now I'm not this. Like, for example, I had a doctor's appointment a couple of weeks ago, turned on the charm bomb, talked that worked at a medical school. And I asked the doctor, I was like, excuse me, so Dr. Connor, like, what did you want to do when you wanted to get into medical school? She's like, well, I went in determined to be a surgeon. I wanted to be a surgeon. Just fascinated me what surgery was like and what you can do with it. And then I did the surgery. And then I realized it wasn't for me, and then she was like, she's still fascinated by it and like its applications and how it works and everything, but performing it wasn't for her. So she went and it's like, okay, what could I do to help folks to get to that point? And it was in family medicine and becoming a primary care physician, where she felt that she can help as many people as possible and get to that point where surgeons can help her. Can help them. But for her, it wasn't for her. So don't feel that when you get into medical school, like, this is what I have to do. You have time to figure it out. And lots of students tend to figure it out during or right after their second year. Mm-hmm.
The only thing that I would add is, what do you like doing? Do you like doing public health? Do public health. If you hate doing public health, vice versa. If you want to sit in a lab and pipetting all day, if you find that fascinating, go for it. If you think that's like putting a spoon in your eyes to pop them out, like, don't do that. It's just like, these are like, and where are you going to thrive? That's the whole part of it. If you're going to be there for a year and people are going to say, oh, Kristen wasn't really interested. She was always showing up late. She was always complaining. Or it would be like, hey, Kristen was a wonderful team member. She contributed. She was excited. She was enthusiastic. She XYZ, all that good stuff. So it just comes down to like, what do you want to do with your time? Because the worst thing you could do in your life is do something that you're miserable. Like, don't do anything that you're miserable. If a medical school wants you to be, I don't know, be able to throw a football 60 foot and if that's not something you're interested in, you can do. Probably that's not medical school you want to go to. I'm just throwing that out there. Like,
yeah, no, exactly.
So it's like you guys are asking these questions, like the nice thing when they're looking at your applications is they're looking for people that have excelled in whatever they chose to do. And if you don't like what you're doing, then you're probably not going to excel. That's just my philosophy, but maybe, I don't know, maybe that's something else. And they don't have like this cookie cutter, because if everybody looked the same, it would be a really boring thing, because not everybody's going to, and they always say like the medicine that you practice is so based on your personality. I work in the ER, and I could tell you that being an ER physician, you have to be someone that likes chaos, is okay with uncertainty. But if you're one of those people that are very neat, organized, and everything needs to be, probably ER is not the thing you should go into. And so that's the whole point of diversity, is not some like thing that they look for. You obviously have to be good academically. That's because medical schools don't want you to fail. The other part of it too, going to a University of California medical school, every year that you're in medical school, not only you're paying for it, but the state pays about $200,000 for you to be a student. So at the end of the year, if UCSD goes to the state and said, oh, we had 100, 200 spots or whatever, 100 spots, and 50 of them dropped out, there's going to be a lot of questions from the state saying, you guys are not doing something right. So like, understand like academics and why it's so important is you got to know how to study. You got to know how to succeed academically. And they have programs that could help you, but you need to show that initial thing. Like, it's kind of like, nobody's, it's kind of like the Olympics, you're not going to show up to the Olympics and run the 100 meter dash. You're going to have to show up. You have to win some. You have to go to a trial. You have to like prove yourself. So anyways, I'm going off tangent now. Sorry.
Well, no, the Olympics are right around the corner. It makes total sense. No, but Jimmy, you're 100% right. Do something that's gonna show you in the best light possible. You know, I keep harping on that, but I feel like a lot of the things like cliche stuff like that is very important because it drives a message home that's whatever this is to demonstrate who you are. Okay, you want to be a doctor. And so what part of you is going to show our committee that you're going to be a good doctor? And so choose those types of experiences that will help you develop that. And also you'll enjoy it and you'll do better and you'll succeed and they'll just translate to that. Yep. Alrighty. Next question.
So the next question is related to interviews, and someone asked, like, what are common mistakes students make during an interview, and what advice can you give people who do get an interview?
I am going to say one thing that is important and one thing that may get me in trouble. So I'm going to say the one thing that's important first. First thing is practice. Practice with a group of friends. Practice with like-minded individuals. If you have if you have a student organization, for example, download, look online, look for some MMI resources and practice questions and kind of just like workshop that with yourselves, or maybe do an event like, hey, practice MMI for medical school interviews. And then from there, just kind of like figure out like what, the type of questions that they may ask, how you answer them, and, moving forward in that regards. So, makes you more comfortable to be in front of people. Keep in mind, like this is all virtual for UCSD anyway, virtual and Zoom. So it's a different dynamic from being in person, when you're in an in-person interview, you're kind of reading the room, making eye contact, seeing everyone. Here, I'm looking at you folks, looking at your screen, but I'm also, for the most part, I'm looking at myself. And let's call it what it is. That's what we do. And so you're kind of seeing like how you're looking to them and and kind of that gets lost in when you're trying to explain your situation. So just having practice in that regards, okay? So the thing that will get me in trouble, or maybe possibly, is there has been from committee members, they know in the interview process if when they give you the prompt and you think you're going to be all smooth and slick and copy and paste and put an AI generated answer, they'll know. And it's not something that like pops up on the screen or something. It's just they can tell that it might not be a genuine answer, that you're kind of just seems like you're reading from a thesaurus kind of thing and not really giving your best explanation. So don't use that because committees will notice that, especially in the interview part. They're going to be very observant, looking at everything. Okay. So when you're taking out time, like, oh, well, let me just, and then do that, then they'll know something's up. And then when they ask you follow-up questions and you don't know that because you're based all your information on an AI response, they're going to see like this person's really kind of just trying to cut corners, and you don't want to cut corners in medical school, it's like, so that's kind of like one of the things that what I've learned in my experience so far in talking to committee members in the interview process. That's one of the things that they've talked about.
The other thing is that I read is AMCAS. This is something that I read, that they're going to put an AI catch. I don't know if they've done it yet, but I know that it was a bunch of things that came out in the academic medicine journal. And so if you've done everything in AI and you're like, oh, and you never know, they may turn on that AI catcher, and then pick that up. That's going to show on their end. So,
Yeah. And you could tell when you're reading some AI stuff, it's like, wow, I sound really smart. Do you? So it's just be wary about that, especially when it comes to the interview process and the application process, especially when it comes to like talking about meaningful experiences. You want it to be sincere and heartfelt. You want your words and your personality come through the page, to come through the screen, not just some programs words for what you did. something to keep in mind. All righty, next
right.
question.
So this student is wondering if GPA is an issue for them, if they should focus on doing a postback, because they're also interested in a master's program. So they're trying to decide between doing a postback program or a master's in health administration. What would you recommend for this student?
I would say that really depends on their academic goals. I mean, ideally, if they could and they have the resources and the time and the energy, this is huge as well. No one asked about that, is to do both. Yeah, if you have all that stuff, but that's not the case for everyone. How long is the master's program? What's the time commitment outside the course room? Do you need hours? That kind of thing, as opposed to post-back is just academically focused. So, I mean, it's up to them really, but a post-back would, if they're going to do a master's program, do the master's program. But if you're just going to be doing undergraduate and going off that GPA and those courses, and you can make it up in the post-back, then do that. But students have the option to do both. It's up to them, but choose whichever one's going to path of least resistance that would just benefit them greater, because it's going to be a lot of work that they're describing. So choose which one fits their situation.
Someone asked if you could elaborate more on the GHAC program you mentioned.
It's actually, if on those links I sent, it's under, where is it? SOM Student Affairs. So SOM Student Affairs. Under that link, you'll find all the information about all the different programs and stuff. And departments as well. You'll find it under there as well. So it's a component where students, obviously taking the MD courses and coursework, but then during the summer when kind of courses aren't as prevalent, then they do a summer international experience. For some students, it could be as locally as Tijuana down here, about 30 miles south, or it could be in South America or Europe or wherever. So it all depends. And I think the 10 family one's going to have one, I believe, in their focus is Southeast Asia, if I'm not mistaken. But like I said, details are still emerging from that one, so we don't know yet, but I know they kind of want to make it in a similar vein. But at the end of the day, you get into MD program, then you see if you qualify. Then GHAC and those types of programs will reach out to you and request some additional information.
Right, and GHAC is not open to pre-med students. So there's a question in there. After you get in the medical school, that you could do global health. There's a lot of things you could do in global health. You could do Peace Corps, you could do GHAC, you could do Fulbright. There's hundreds of things you could do as a undergraduate in global health and global things. Somebody put in there, should I put in what I'm interested in? And it's like, if you say, oh, I'm going to go serve in low income community clinic, but then all your shadowing experience was in a plastic surgeon's office in Beverly Hills, it's kind of like, or like I want to find a cure for cancer, but then like you worked at a clinic, you volunteered or you shadowed in a Beverly Hills, plastic surgeon. That's just not, it's not going to add. Like, and somebody also asked about your hours. How will you know? It's like, these people that read your applications, they read about 7,000 applications a year, 7 to 9. They're pretty smart people.
They
and
know.
they could
They'll
tell.
pick it up.
They
Yeah.
will know. And so don't make anything up, or they could always check a reference. They could just say, hey, this doesn't make sense. If you've got 168 hours a week and something like, I don't know, 3,000 something. But if you're saying that, oh, I went to school and I took 25 units and I spent 3,000 hours a year doing this and 2,000, it's like, it's not going to add up. Like either that or you just didn't sleep and that's just not possible. So don't make anything up. Like, be honest. Like, say if you only done 50 hours, do 50 hours.
Yeah.
Don't make that stuff up. Anyway, sorry.
No. That's great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Our next question is, would you say that undergrad lab research makes you stand out in an application, or is it less considered?
It wouldn't make it less considered and it wouldn't make it stand out, but definitely it adds depth to the application. So what that means is that like that just shows another part of you that's like geared towards not only the institution that you're applying to, like if you're doing that at like, UCSD, but also the dedication to like pursuing this degree, this career path, so it only could benefit you. It's not going to benefit you tangentially, like, oh, out of this was a 8 applicant, now they're a 9.5 applicant, like not like that. But it definitely can add more to it because you're working at the institution that's definitely giving you that you're applying for. So obviously you're getting some of that experience. And committee, like Jim said, well, there's smart folks. They'll connect the dots. Like, okay, like this person knows UCSD health and the system and how it works and it operates.
The other thing I would just add is that UCSD is a tier 1 research university. They're in the heart of biotech, and they have a lot of research money and research thing. And research, I mean, so their research is very important, not just at UCSD, but every medical school. And the reason why is once you're done with your residency and you're practicing, the only way you're going to keep up, you have to, first of all, do continuing medical education, but you have to keep up. During COVID, a lot of the things that were happening were peer review people that were doing research and posting it, and people were reading about it. So clinical, in terms of like clinical changes that happens all the time, that happens through research, and nobody's going to put you in a classroom. You got to be able to read papers, understand them, and alter your clinical practice. And you may have to do it in the middle of a global pandemic, or changes that happens, and that's how you stay current. And then going and doing your continuing medical education. So why medical schools? Yes, you don't have to, but you have to understand it, and you have to spend some time into it. You got 4 or 5 years to do it. But if you love doing research, God bless you, do research. They need that. That's how medicine moves forward. That's why we don't do bloodletting anymore, and you know we don't do bloodletting, or we don't just like amputate legs anymore. We actually like go and fix your broken bone. And so medicine has to move forward, and that's why research is important. So anyway, sorry.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah. Thank you very much for that. All righty. And we have a few more minutes, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's one
all
more
right.
question that someone had. How does UCSD view reapplicants? What advice do you have for them? And could you elaborate more on your conditional acceptance program?
I cannot elaborate on our conditional acceptance program because I'm still learning that because we're going through the process, but I'll be posting my email address so they can follow up with me. I'll do that in the chat in a second. I'm sorry, what was the first part again?
How does UCSD view reapplicants, and what advice do you
Oh,
have?
reapplicants, yeah. We review them just the same as anyone else. One of the things we want to make sure you do is it's gonna roll over some of the information, but you're still gonna have to start the application brand new, fresh. So whatever you use for your 2024 application, change all the dates and everything to reflect something for your 2025 application. Because if we see that, it's one of those kind of like, as we were mentioning earlier, like the benefits of going to UCSD and applying to medical school. It's not really something tangible that they're going to look at like, oh, man, this person's great. Same as if you do that in an application where you're pretty much submitting all the same stuff. It's not gonna be detrimental, but we're just gonna look at it like you could have just changed some dates there. So we don't look at them bad. It's just a fresh, clean start. but ideally, if they're going to be updating all their application materials, the better. You know, if nothing's changed in terms of experiences and letters of rec and all that, that's fine. If there's something that changed dramatically over the course of the year that made them maybe take the year off to reapply the next year, then by all means they could do that as well. So we don't look poorly or down on reapplicants.
Yeah, and also in regards to research, you could go back and look at our previous event. We've had Dr. Gulima, who actually specifically talked about research. And Dr. Gulima is the Dean of Admission for UCSD School of Medicine. So you could go look at that. And actually, we've had like 7 or 8 deans that talked about research. So, you know, your homework is to go back and look at some of them and you know, hear what they say about that.
No.
All right, so a lot of these questions are related to like the sub like 500 or like different GPA cutoffs. And so one student is wondering the chances of getting considered for secondary if they have a sub 500, like in terms of like the tiers. So is there like strict number cutoffs for like if there's a tier 1 and then tier 2, tier 3 per year?
Well, the tiers is primarily driven by the GPA. But you know, so if like a student has a below GPA, it will, you know, that for the MCAT, there's really no cut. It's like around, they'll look at a lower score, but you want to stay around 500. 500 is like where you want to be at. That's like the sweet spot. High GPA, low GPA, you want to stick around 500 because that's getting you in the door at least. That's putting your foot in the door. You're going to get a second look. Okay. They're going to look at your application again for the secondary part. But there really is no cutoff at the end. Like I said, don't focus on the minimums. If you focus on the minimums, you're not focusing on the goal, which is to get into medical school. So, but like I said, you want to have it as high as possible so you don't have to have this conversation. You know, you want to improve your chances of getting in. Now, there's some other schools that might have lower GPAs and all that, lower test scores. You know, you might want to look at them. The MCAS website that I put on there. There's something called CYMS. I'm gonna put it acronym right there. CYMS in the chat. What that stands for is Choose Your Medical School, and so that's a way where you can kind of like create like your ideal type of medical school, like cost, location, types of programs, all that kind of stuff. And then they'll give you all the information on there. And there's something also on there called the Medical School Admission Requirements, MSAR. And then through MSAR, you can look at the school's requirements, admission requirements, GPA, test score, all that stuff. And they'll have that listed based on the schools you'd want to as well. So, that being said, the higher the better, but there's really no like cutoff determined really with the test score, but for the GPA, it's definitive, like anything below 3.1, you're not getting any kind of consideration, regardless of the test score.
Okay, last question, I think, because I know we're pretty close to time, but someone asked, if you graduated from a liberal arts focused college that did not have many research opportunities, how can you go about getting that experience post-grad?
You can, the best way they could do that is, you know, if a student still has able to go back to their undergraduate institution and work with their career services, because I know for some undergraduate institutions, like for instance at San Diego State, once you graduate, you have until 6 months that you have access to everything. Then after like so many months, then you have to pay the alumni fee to get access to everything, you know? And so depending on the institution, if they can go back, you know, make an appointment with a counselor and say, I want to, and a lot of these departments do have a career advisor or someone that helps with, you know, medical fields or pre-health or something like that. And then they could probably point you in the right direction or the resources. But a lot of times it's just about like, as Jubin said, like, what do you like to do? You know, do you like helping in hospitals? Do you like working in the clinics? Do you like working for the Bloodmobile? You know, those kind of things, you know. Find, you know, it's a lot of times it's going to involve hitting the pavement and just going out and about in the community and just seeing where you can volunteer, you know. Um, that's why it's important to build those networks when you're in undergraduate or even at the community college, you know, in your time, whether it be a 4 year or the community college, build those networks because you never know when they're going to happen. Like my network randomly, give you an example. Someone I knew when I was a freshman at San Diego State back in 1999, okay, when I was a little freshman, was on my interview committee for this job. And she was like, what happened to your hair? But besides that, you know, she was like, oh my God, Rodrigo, so nice to see you. And it was just because her and I had a good relationship. We worked together. We had that going. And then that helped me down the line. And I didn't even know that. It was a happy coincidence. Same thing, just get involved, build those networks so you can, when it comes to these types of situations, you are able to figure out like where I can go. And maybe you might not know where to go, but someone in your network will know where to go. And attending stuff like this and working with this organization is a great place to start. You guys are there. Juben's been awesome. You know, he has the experience working in this. He's seen these presentations and he knows what it takes to be a doctor. And like I said, my email address is right there. It's generic, but I check it. I'm the one that checks it every day. So if you get hi, this is Rodrigo, blah, 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 that's me. To answer all your questions. And like I said, you know, it's all cyclical, kind of like when you went through undergraduate, you know, you apply, take your test score, you wait, you wait, you wait, you wait. And then April, we let you know. And then in medical school, it's different. You pick 3 schools, and then from there, you're just like, well, what do these 3 schools that want me, what do they have for me? You know, then you can determine what you want to do. But that's kind of like the purpose of this whole thing. Like, do what you want to do, figure out what's best, and have that determine your path, whether or not medical school is right for you. I know hates and sounding all cheesy, but I want to thank you guys for your time. Hope it went well. Email me, and thank you all very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you again for coming today. Thank you for staying a minute longer. I think the bottom line is that everybody's asking a lot of like these detailed questions, and these are great questions.
Mhm.
We have a lot of those things that we talked about. You could go back and look at our previous sessions. This session will also be posted pretty soon on our YouTube page. And thank you everyone for coming. And if you have more questions, you could contact, and we put that email and everything in the chat. So everyone have a great evening, and thank you again, Mr. Gutierrez, for making time for us and